Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Stanley's Lucky Man, Season 2, Episode 2. So, going into this episode, there might be some dicey kind of subject matter in this episode. But, really, I'm starting to really enjoy Season 2 much more so than I enjoyed Season 1. It kind of felt like Season 1, a lot of the cases were honestly forgettable. I think the more important things were whatever was happening with Harry and either kind of what was going on in his life much more so than his detective cases. It honestly feels like they have a perfect balance going on of us caring about what is going on with Harry, but also what is going on with the cases per every episode. Maybe the cases might be much more intriguing than the actual things of Harry and everyone else. But I also like that they're not really harping back on to the first season and how they really have to but that Golden guy though, man, we gotta focus on that Golden guy. Man, we gotta how they have to keep reminding us of season 1. That doesn't actually happen much in this episode, but there is a slight reference in this episode 2 of still what is going on with episode 1, but it's not prominent. So it's just a way for us to just keep tying us onto that they do care about what had gone on with season 1. But anyways, so really in this episode, I would say that for Game of Thrones fans, people might find this episode to be interesting. I'm not going to clickbait people by putting Game of Thrones as a tag at the bottom of the video so I can see if anybody who's going to come here from Game of Thrones is bizarrely going to watch this one episode. I'm not going to take that kind of time, because I already know if I put Game of Thrones into a tag, no one's going to be interested in this show because of Game of Thrones. It's not going to happen. It's either you like this show because you like it, and eventually this is the icing on top of the cake, or whichever. But there is a person from Game of Thrones that is in here, so enjoy this episode, I guess, for that. If you know about Game of Thrones, and coincidentally also like this show. So, going on here, we have kind of this very nice maneuver of continuity from episode to episode. A detective which was to be in first episode has actually a story going on in his second episode. Some guy that we just thought wasn't going to be important at all of a sudden in the second episode was to actually be important. And I was like, oh, okay, so I didn't even remember what his name was. I didn't even look at him in IMDb to figure out who this guy was in the first episode, but I guess he is in the second episode. So that's interesting. So, also going into this episode, we have some interesting things going on with Eve and Isabel, so maybe there might be a connection between these two characters, which we'll get in this episode. Also, we are to also have really us having this conundrum of whether Harry is really good at his job or he's really just still very much more being lucky than anything else. Plus, also, we are to consistently see Isabel. That wasn't just one episode thing. It seems like we're going to consistently see this person consistently, and it also seems that Isabel is going to consistently try to help Harry with all of his cases one way or the other, if you know what I mean, via watching this episode. So, really, I'm liking the second season better than the first. I guess it should be obvious that you should, but yeah, the cases, pretty good, interesting, better than the first season. So let's go into this. So, what is to happen with this episode is to tie into a detective named Okile, that is to have been from the last episode. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I might be butchering it. So, it seems that he is to have a boyfriend that is to have gotten murdered, and so in almost like a very old fashioned like style, like back into a dark alley, and guys to get stabbed and murdered, and eventually there are people that are starting to just get stabbed in dark alleys, kind of Jack the Ripper style, but it's not like the exact same kind of way or kind of story, because Jack the Ripper is a much like Jack the Ripper used to go and take women of the night and kill them. It's not the same thing, but I'm just mean, like it's kind of like a like bizarrely, like this guy is just killing people in the streets. It's weird. So uh eventually that is to lead to a Reverend Huxley that might be familiar to Game of Thrones fans. And that is to eventually lead to them trying to figure out who exactly the killer is in this episode. Really, really, I think a lot of people would easily and quickly pin this whole thing on Reverend Huxley, and a lot of people might feel good by the end of this episode. So, with that said, I think I'm just going to go into spoilers at the end of this episode, or I'm just going to get into spoilers about the beginning, middle, and end of this episode. A little bit of tongue tied, and I don't know why. Probably because I spent an hour talking about Thor the Dark World, and there's a lot of stuff to have unpacked via there. So you can kind of tell like when exactly I'm doing things, because I had just done the Dark World, and that's already out, and now I'm just kind of like just doing this on probably another day. So, anyways, let's get into that coveted double 5 time count. Let's get into spoilers. Let's unpack this episode, because you know it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. Still covenantly going into. I probably could have just like whatever. I make jokes about it. So let's go into this episode. So we have Okile, and I'm butchering that name. And I realize people can try to adjust and tell me what it is or how it's pronounced, and that's perfectly okay, because I like taking time to reading a comment and just saying, okay, great. It doesn't matter, because I don't know if this person is going to have a consistent thing here through these episodes. It might just be a person we forget quickly after this episode, weirdly enough. So Okile is to be at a nightclub with a guy named Kevin. It seems like these characters are to be engaged, and so supposedly Kevin is to be Okile's fiance. So these two are at the club, they're getting busy with it, and so Kevin is to leave said club, and he is to eventually wind up dead. So Harry is with Isabel, just watching her just roll the dice at some casino table, and Harry is just like, what am I going to learn from this? Like, I thought I was going to learn like the power of the bracelet from you, and like all I'm watching is you roll the dice and you consistently win. What am I learning from that? And so eventually that leads like Isabel just like basically saying that like, well, yeah, you just need to like consistently use the bracelet. You need to use the bracelet like all the time, every time, everywhere. Just use it all. Just use it all up. Just use all the luck crazily. Cause why not? But Harry doesn't have the time for that crap. So Harry is to get a call from Surrey, and Surrey is to tell him, yeah, you should have been here like a little bit ago, just so you know, because yeah, there is an assault case that you needed to be attached to. And Harry's like, oh crap. So Harry is to go off to meet Surrey at this like basically morgue, where they are to kind of like check upon this guy and kind of look through him. Like bizarrely, I think they're trying as much as possible to seem similar like the first season, but it seems like they're also trying to do things differently. So uh so Winter is giving these guys a briefing about the case, how Okile's like the DC Okile his partner has been killed, and so like whatever like resources that you need to solve this case as quickly as possible, let me know. So Suri is telling Harry that he needs a mint because he smells like alcohol, and Harry's like, okay, great, thanks for the mint. So Harry and Suri are to go into this doctor's room where he is to uh, basically have like showcasing that like, yeah, this guy's dead. Look at him. He has a screwdriver through his head. So it seems like this doctor is to break down how this guy had been attacked, which was great. And so eventually Harry is to notice that there is some kind of bruise on this guy's shoulder, but the doctor is to mention that's not a bruise, it's actually a tattoo that I guess had been removed some time before. So like after they have kind of like suspected this body and checked it out, Orwell and Suri are to have their little moment where Orwell is to ask Suri, it's like, hey, am I ever gonna get out of the doghouse? Like, come on, like, if anything, yeah, I made some mistakes, and yeah, he got busted down in rank. But like, am I ever gonna get out of the doghouse? And Suri is just like, well, just do your job, and like, and then like you shouldn't have a problem. But it's also that like Orwell is way too focused on Harry that he's not doing his job correctly. He's not doing his job properly because he's too focused on Harry rather than focusing on his own work. He's making mistakes, and that's obvious. And that happens even in this episode, that Orwell is to make a mistake. So Harry is to go off with Okile. I'm going to ill-pronounce that through a bulk of this episode, so I apologize. Harry is... I don't know if it's spelled correctly, because it's like... I'm lucky to remember half the stuff that I remember. So Harry is to eventually talk to this detective and ask if, like, this could have quite possibly been a hate crime, just because Kevin is to have been, of course, who he is, whichever dicey subject. So Harry is to talk with this detective and mention if like Kevin did have any like people against him, any villains, any arch nemesis that Harry isn't aware of. And this guy is like, no, like I can't think of anything off the top of my head where anybody would want this guy dead. And so I ate some bread, and then I led to me going like this, going, I don't know where I did all that rhyming there, but it just happened. So all of a sudden, it seems that there is a protest going on, and it seems that Harry is like getting knee deep in the middle of it. And all of a sudden, Harry is to like conflict with one of the protesters, and just like try to like he's trying to like get this like spot from like erupting and being a riot to just like have people fight things out. So Harry is trying to defuse things, he can't, and so he just starts arresting people from this protest. So eventually Harry is Harry is to go back to the office to seemingly find out the only person that was around the scene of the crime around the time where Kevin had gotten killed was a guy named Sean Blake. So they go and they bring him in for questioning, but let's transition here for a little bit. So Isabel is to be going on a swim, and while Isabel is to be doing that, Eve is going and taking out some of her men. And so Isabel is to be getting out of the pool and having a good conversation with Eve forcibly. So the big takeaway from the Eve and Isabel conversation is that Isabel had been given this bracelet by Eve. And so I'm like, oh wait, so like Eve bizarrely has just been handing out all these bracelets. How many more bracelets does Eve have? Can I get one? Like, is there like is there a limited edition? Is there only two? Like, could I get me a lucky bracelet? Like, man, that'd be great. Like, yeah, it might suck because if anything, like it evens out. Like the bill always comes due in Doctor Strange terms, but uh, like from Mordo from Doctor Strange, but still, like could I get me some of that sweet bracelet? Me and like Harry can just do cling cling with bracelets. That'd be pretty sweet. But anyways, so like Eve is holding out on some bracelets, mother. Like I want some of the bracelets. Give me some of that. I want some of that. Yeah. Anyways, so Eve and Isabel are talking this out, and so that's just to lead to like I think honestly Eve probably wants to use Isabel to go and find Golding. I think that's the like I think that's why Eve was coming in there. But why isn't I would have said like, "Hey Isabel, you're going to help me with my case finding Golding. You're going to do it. You're going to do that now." But no, it doesn't happen. So F it all. So now we're back with Sean Blake to find out what the heck he was doing between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And so Sean Blake was mentioning that he was delivering soups and sandwiches to the needy. And so he eventually is to talk about a man named Reverend Huxley. And it seems Harry has consistently been hearing that name wafting in the air. I guess because of the protesters from some time before. And so Harry is now going like, what is up with this Reverend? Like, why is he to be like consistently in the air somehow? So we transitioned there to have Anna taking Daisy out to school, and while she is to do that, she is to eventually find that there are cops that are to follow her, and she is not quite understanding why. Well, she doesn't know they're cops. She just assumes that they're like maybe people from Golding that are coming after her. So Anna is to take Daisy to school, and then Anna is to like disappear where these cops could not find her. All of a sudden, Anna is to appear out of the shadows and start to mace one of the cops, and just be like, "Why are you after me? Like, I'll call the cops." And the cops are like, "Dude, we are the cops because this guy right here already said so," and so accidentally, so Anna is to eventually go to the police department, and so Winter is just like, "Hey, cool your jets, Anna. Like, if anything, Harry had put a detail on you because there was supposedly a Golding sighting in London. So cool your jets. Like, if anything, Harry was trying to give you your space, but he was also like putting a detail on you so that way he could protect you because Golding might have been seen somewhere." And so, like, I think Anna was kind of won over by that, but then also, like, Anna probably might have would have said, like, "Harry, how about you pick up the freaking phone?" Like, how about you pick up the phone? So Anna is to go out to a place, and there is immediately a guy that is hitting on her and asking her out for a date. And Anna wants nothing to do with this guy. She just walks away because she does not want to date another murderer that is going to instantly try to hit on her. So we transition yet again because there's a lot of transitions going on in this episode. So Harry is to go and be driving his car like a wild man, just like all over the place with this pantomime. And so bizarrely, Harry's car is to backfire at the perfect time to have him meet with Isabel. And Isabel's like, "Wow, what a coincidence. I just so happen to be here as your car just farted away. So Harry and Isabel are to go up on top of this building, and so Harry is to talk about his case and everything that is like, so he's kind of venting about his day. And so Isabel is to eventually like force Harry to want to take risks, to forcibly want him to get up on top of the very like edge of this building and just see where that takes them. And Harry's like, "What are you doing? Like you're acting kind of crazy." And so Isabel is to consistently just start walking on the edge of this building, and Harry's like, "What are you doing?" And so Harry is to see Isabel drop off, and Harry is to look down to see that Isabel is on top of some elevator. And Isabel is to mention to Harry, like, "Don't you see, Harry? We're invincible." And I'm like, "Sure you are. Sure you are." Just wait until you get shot, and then you're like, "Oh, yeah, I guess we're not that invincible." But I think she makes it into the later seasons. I think Isabel is going to have some staying power. Like I seen a little clip from something that I didn't actually want to see, and so like I know where Isabel is to eventually head somewhere, but I can't say what that is because it would be technically spoiling other things, which I don't want to go into. So Harry is to eventually bring in Huxley, and it seems that uh, they are to start like grilling this guy, but it really. Or no, wait. Harry. Wait. Yeah. Let's get this correct. So Harry is to show up at Huxley's like church. There we go. Huxley getting like brought in like happens later when they actually have some real hard evidence supposedly on Huxley. So Harry goes to speak with Harry goes to speak with Huxley at his church, and the Reverend uh, is to say like, well, anything that you can say in front of my church people. And so Harry is to eventually mention about like, hey, where were you at this time and all kinds of things. And so eventually Harry is to like start talking and asking this Reverend questions, and this Reverend is to mention to Harry, it's like, hey, like what big hole that you have that isn't being filled with you going to church? Like, is it alcohol? Is it, oh, it's gambling, isn't it? And so we have Huxley, who is like really like scorning Harry for ever having to have gambled once in his life. Harry is to defend himself and say that he hasn't been gambling in a number of years or a number of whatever days or whichever. And Huxley is like, sure, but you've been gambling, haven't you? You've been gambling. Isn't it so something that you would be doing right now? Technically, with the bracelet, you could say that technically Harry still is gambling, but he knows he can win. Like, every time that Harry is to still have this bracelet, he is technically still gambling, but a different kind. To where reasonably, like, he could be sleeping and still be gambling because maybe his house could burn down, but Harry is still alive because anything could happen, especially within this episode. So, Harry is to have Huxley as just a person of suspicion on a board, and I guess they have boards now in this season compared to the first where they were just like, like I guess this show has money so they can afford a board now. So, but evidently this is like the big case, I guess. So, uh, so Harry is to eventually look up more stuff on the Reverend Huxley to find out that he has seemingly a non-disclosure thing on his like ledger, and so Harry's like, well, I gotta figure out like what this whole thing is. Like, I gotta find out what the no disclosure thing is. Like, we gotta figure out what that is. And they're like, well, yeah, of course we do, but like we're not going to be able to because that was like one of those kind of sealed kind of things that we're not going to be able to find. But Harry goes out of his way to unseal that unsealed document eventually somewhere in this episode. So, uh, so the next victim who is to be bludgeoned in the head is to be a woman named Melanie Spencer. So immediately Winter is with Harry at this case, and Winter is to tell Harry, like, well, it's obviously not Huxley. Like, he was within his church people during that time, so if anything, you need to widen your suspicions. If anything, Winter is telling Harry that he needs to go and check the husband because maybe these kills aren't connected, or maybe it could be a serial killer, and there is this bizarre connection that might not make sense quite right now. So Harry is to forcibly go and speak with Robert Spencer, and he is to have to give a blood sample. And so when they are to go and check out the body of Melanie Spencer, they are to find out that Melanie bizarrely has the same tattoo that it looked like Kevin had. And so they're like, okay, like this tattoo is to say 1822. What does that mean? So eventually it seems like both the tattoos matched, like the size and everything. They go in back to back arms and see that the tattoos are similar, so they're trying to make the connection that maybe like people are going after Huxley's people. Maybe any person that had been with Huxley at some point in time, maybe Huxley is to uh, be calling off some other person to kill off all these people. Maybe Huxley is, I don't know, somehow involved in this. So we are back to Oakley, or Oakley, the same detective that I have problem saying the name of. They go back to him, and so uh, they ask him about Kevin's tattoo, and Oakley is to mention that the DC. Let's just call him DC for the rest of the freaking episode, so I can kind of just easily not have to missay this guy's name. So the DC is to mention, well, like why would Kevin have Leviticus tattooed on his arm? And Harry is like, what is Leviticus? Supposedly Leviticus, this Bible verse 18/22 is to talk about a man laying with another man and how it's an abomination. And it seems like Harry was spouting that before uh, when Huxley was in uh, this spot. He kind of repeated what Huxley was saying about a man laying with another man and how it's an abomination. Harry had mentioned that to like Surrey and how like he hates that stuff. Or no, he was like saying that to Winter because like it seems like Harry wanted to tie this whole case to Huxley because of the whole like abomination with a man laying with another man thing, kind of showing that Harry is just like, yeah, like anybody wants to do anything, they can go ahead and do so. So that's yeah. So Harry is finding out like, okay, so there's something to consistently keep tying this whole thing with Huxley because he spouted the exact same thing that the DC is to mention in this Bible verse, coincidentally. So Harry is desperately going to an office to try to get into a computer to try to find out that undisclosed file that was to be of Huxley, and so Harry does. So Harry is to try to figure out the password of this computer, and we find out that the password is actually like underneath the mouse. So Harry is to go and click in the password and find out some documents that were undisclosed, but Harry could look at them and check them out. So that is to bring in Huxley into interrogation, so that way Harry can question some things about Huxley to see what his answers are. So Harry is to bring in Huxley and mention quite possibly how Kevin and Melanie are tied together with Huxley about the tattoos, and Huxley is like, well, just because someone is to wear the tattoo, not everyone might like follow what the tattoo is to really legitimately mean. And Huxley is to again toss into the fact that Harry is still a gambler, and like really just ridiculing him of that consistently, because I guess this guy has no other better thing to heckle Harry with but the whole gambling thing. As soon as like Huxley was to find that one vice of Harry, he's just like really just beating a dead horse with this, metaphorically saying. But anyways, so Harry is just like, well, okay, so it doesn't really seem like I'm getting much from this guy. And so eventually the whole thing is to come out that uh, that Harry is to bring up the disclosed file, and immediately Huxley is like, "Oh my god! Like that file was to be disclosed and never to be shown to anybody." But Harry is to bring up the file about uh, Huxley being a Doctor Huxley, and that it seems he used to be a psychiatrist that used to go and change a guy from being a gay man to trying to therapize him into being a straight man. And so I guess that's what Huxley used to do as a doctor, supposedly. Um, and so really Huxley is like, well, yeah, because I myself used to actually be gay, and I went through treatment and I like changed. And so really I guess Huxley had taken his therapy and changed and had become a reverend to try to speak with people, and so eventually we found that Dr. Huxley had changed Kevin and changed him to, I guess, at first be a person that could change other people. And we go to find out that Kevin was to eventually convert. It's an awful word. Kevin was to eventually convert Robert Spencer, because Melanie was to actually not have been a gay herself, or lesbian, whichever word. I don't. So Melanie was not gay. Like, she just wore the tattoo because of her husband's change. So all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute. So maybe Huxley is not actually the culprit of all this, but maybe there is still blood on his hands because of what he had done. So really Harry is to eventually go through the camera feeds that Orwell was supposed to go through, and Harry is to notice that Robert Spencer was to be at the nightclub where Kevin was on that same night. It seems that Robert was to leave, and then shortly there to follow, so was Kevin. And so Harry's like, oh my god, Orwell, why didn't you find Kevin in this camera feed? And Orwell is like, dude, I must have checked this camera I don't know how many times, and I never saw Kevin in this camera. And so that's when Surrey hits him with, like, well, you know what? If you would focus better on your job instead of Harry, like, maybe you would actually do a better job. So, moving on. So, uh, eventually they are to have to forcibly let loose Huxley because there isn't any real true evidence to link Huxley to these murders, so they have to forcibly let him go. We find that Robert is to have his tattoo on his arm, but Robert is to put a razor blade through it and like repetitiously just put razor blades through his freaking arm, which is just awful. But so so eventually they are to start looking for Robert, and so Harry is to go into uh, like getting into his car, and so Robert is to go and crash his car into Harry's and then run off. Harry is to eventually seem injured. There's kind of glass all over his bate, and so Harry is to all of a sudden have his like car almost starting to blaze up, like start on fire. And all of a sudden Harry is having this bizarrish nightmare that I don't quite understand where it's coming from. And it seems that this bizarrish nightmare is to wake up Harry and to get him out of this car before this car is to really set a fire and blow up and kill Harry. So I guess luck of the bracelet yet again, right? So eventually when Huxley is to be released, because like Harry wanted to keep Huxley there because maybe like Robert could have gotten to him, but they just let Huxley get released anyways. So uh Harry is to eventually try and find Robert, but he is to just fail at this. But eventually, Harry is to find Robert in Huxley's church because Robert is to put a knife basically to Huxley to like finish up this whole like the people that have wronged Robert and so on and so forth. And eventually Harry is to find Robert there. So Robert is to try to understand this, or Harry is to understand the story of Robert. So Harry is to find out that both uh, Kevin and Robert were to have left this club, and and Robert was to talk to Kevin, and Kevin was to mention to Robert, "Hey man, you can get a clean slate. Like you can leave all this behind and start fresh." And Robert could not do that because he had a wife and a kid. And so like he couldn't just up and leave his life because he wanted to go back to being he wanted to go back to being gay, but he had a wife and he had a kid, and that wasn't something he could easily just do. Robert, all he wanted to do was actually just hug Kevin because it seemed like uh, all the stuff that Robert was actually like doing with all these sessions with Kevin wasn't really to want to change him, was really to just have Robert eventually get closer to Kevin. And I guess since Kevin had found another man, like Robert had killed Kevin out of just pure jealousy and just pure like rage of the fact that he couldn't get away from his life and start fresh like Kevin had done. So and like Kevin was technically the cause of that, or Dr. Huxley was technically the cause of that. And so then eventually Robert had killed his wife, of course, because again, out of rage and whichever. So that led Robert back to Huxley, of the guy who had tried to change Robert, and Robert didn't want to change. So eventually, Robert is to have a knife to Huxley, mentioning that he'll do it. And Harry is just like, you know what, go ahead and do it. Do it because this is an awful man that has done some awful things and blah, 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 blah. And so Huxley is like, what the heck are you doing? Like, this guy is going to kill me. This guy has a knife to my throat, and you're giving him reasons to kill me. And so Harry's going on and like basically tempting this guy to literally pull the trigger, and Robert doesn't. And so Harry punches Robert in the face to knock him down. And the Reverend is like, oh my god, like, this guy could have killed me. And why did you let him do that? And so Harry is to go and take a plastic glove and pick up the box cutter and just look at Huxley. And Huxley is just like this whole situation. So Harry is to slowly but surely walk off and call the police and let them know what all had happened. So Surrey, after all this, is just like, man, like, if anything, Harry, you were teeing up this whole thing to be tied with Reverend Huxley, and it was actually just tied to Robert. And so Harry is like, well, yeah, like, it kind of, like, it seemed like he had something tied to this. And Surrey was like, well, yeah, but, like, you weren't right, you were just lucky this time around. And Harry was like, yeah, so what? Like, we got the guy in the end. So after this, we have uh, Harry, who is to be back with Anna and Daisy. And so it seems that Daisy is going out with Harry, and it seems that Daisy is having problems with eyeliner. And so Anna is to mention, like, yeah, like, Daisy's really bad at eyeliner, but hey, like, at least she's trying. So Daisy is to go out with makeup because evidently she won't leave without eyeliner on. And so Harry is to make a joke about, I think she looks like Robert Smith or something like that, some bizarrish thing. I guess that's like popular wherever they are. So Daisy is to eventually leave and have Anna uh, and Harry talking. And so Anna's like, well, do you think that she should be going out with, like, Golding quite possibly still on the loose? And Harry's like, I wouldn't be having my daughter go out if I wouldn't be, like, absolutely sure that things will be fine with, like, her going out. So like, there's no kiss, there's no, like, intimate moments between Harry and Anna within this whole entire episode. So I guess we're not going to get that. Maybe in other episodes, maybe. But so, if anything, Harry is to get a call, after, like, leaving Anna and going with Daisy somewhere. Harry is to get a call via Isabel, and so we are to start seeing, like, Huxley kind of walking in the street and, like, kind of seeing one person pick up something, and Huxley is kind of looking at them. And we also have Isabel walking in some street somewhere. And so Isabel is talking to Harry, and it's like, you know what, it is quite a real shame that, like, you couldn't get anything on this Huxley character. And Harry's like, well, yeah, like, I really don't like the guy, and I was just kind of hoping that this would, like, eventually come up Huxley eventually. And Isabel is to see Huxley all of a sudden get hit by a bus, and Isabel is to mention to Harry, it's like, well, maybe something will come up after all. Basically showcasing that it seems like if Harry isn't going to get his man, then maybe Isabel is going to help him get his man for him, like one way or a lucky other. So, with that said, I think that does cover most of this episode. Uh, I would say that this episode is an enjoyable episode, and just for the fact that eventually, like there was this whole like, who is it? Who could it be? And here's also the goofy thing. So Robert was to supposedly give a DNA sample, but like, what did the DNA sample like? I guess the DNA sample just led to Bubkiss nowhere, or maybe they just like, I don't think I remember what happened with the DNA sample. I think that was just to get Robert into the fray of things. And so yeah, I guess Harry needs to broaden his spectrum of figuring out who this person is. And so like his first uh, like suspicions may not be the right one. And so like this whole episode is going to, I guess, or this whole season is going to tie Harry much more on getting lucky than it is to be right. So I guess really just Harry is to eventually make a lot of mistakes in this episode, but eventually he will get his man eventually. So I guess that's the real true thing of this episode. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here because I spent too long talking about this. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.